Hello, 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 beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. We are back after yet another incredible week of the USL. We have a long one or a short one, depending on how the conversations go. They're never short as long as I'm around, and we all know that. So before I get too long-winded, I want to go ahead and thank Ryan Smelter, Matt Peel, Timothy Meadows, Andrew Towsley, Oliver Hedgehog, Kunal Patel, MOS, MNF, oh my gosh, MF Reg 30, goodness gracious, Tim Knox, Rian Lacara, Stephen Howard, Jeremy Churchman, Alberto Aguilar, Noah Telford, Michael Fuchs, Joshua Duder, John Fuller, Christopher Kump, Frank Anthony, John Hunt, and Harry Austin. Thank you for being wonderful patrons. We appreciate you very much. And NF Reg 30, thank you for not unsubscribing to your Patreon because I butcher your name every single week. I'm sorry. John, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. I'm happy that it's a very light news day and we have very little to talk about.
Yeah, a couple of things. If you want to keep up with the U.S. Open Cup, we have a ticker down the bottom, which will be coming up, which I think is the only news of the day. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Ryan, how are you?
Doing well, and maybe it's just as well that the betting service I use doesn't have Open Cup odds tonight, so saving some money.
Hey, speaking of the U.S. Open Cup, and we know there's other reasons why people are here, so give us a minute. There's a lot of fun matches going on tonight, a lot of red cards, all the ways, the fun thing you want to see. I think Faro SC gets at least 3 red cards every single U.S. Open Cup, which is fun. And hey, the winner, the overall prize pool has doubled. The winner gets more money than your MLS Cup winner and your Champions League winner. So a nice little bump to see in the U.S. Open Cup winners. So, hey, take it super seriously because you're going to get an even bigger payday.
And that's an extra $50,000, or it's now up to $50,000 for the team in the division that goes the furthest as well, which if you're in the open divisions, if you will, from League Two and beyond, that is a massive payday for your club.
Yes, it is. Wonderful stuff.
I will say, kind of middling performances from a lot of USL teams tonight. I mean, I know we're not going to deep dive it, but a lot of close games so far.
Let me tell you, this was what I was going to say. I think that the idea of punishing teams for not making the playoffs is your best, is the best way to deal with not having pro rel. I think it's a great idea for having those teams who don't make the playoffs kind of have to go through the bottom of the gauntlet, almost like there is promotion relegation. Oh, speaking of, the USL owners have agreed, a super majority, that pro rel is coming on the stipulation that the Division 1 Premier League, goes through in 2028. So if the Division 1 league starts, Premier League, in 2028, there will be pro rel. Thoughts on that?
Well, they can position it as, yes, it will absolutely be pro rel. There are a lot of logistical things that will need to be decided to get that system in place. But I think we can get to that in a minute because this is a really big story. This is something that the USL has been talking about for the better part of a decade publicly from the highest levels at USL headquarters. Now we're looking at actually having it happen. This is something that fans have been excited about. People really think is the silver bullet to get more attention on the league, give it that extra push in terms of the growth. Certainly it'll be exciting for us if it comes to fruition as people who cover this sport and this competition to see pro rel, to see those games matter. But yeah, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but there's a lot that goes along with pro rel for it to actually be a thing that moves the needle.
And this is a credit to Paul Tenorio of The Athletic, who thankfully broke this article before we hit record on tonight's episode. But yeah, it's one thing to say that we have voted with, crucially wording here, a supermajority. If it was unanimous, Paul would have likely said unanimous, or the league would have announced it as such. But it's very crucial that we now have a lot of kind of work to do between here and 2028. The league has to get the approval for their D1 status. They have to work out how the league's going to be structured, which teams are going to start in which division from here on out. But it's exciting, especially as someone who's covered the league since 2014, to have like basically go from the conversations like John, you had mentioned for the better part of a decade to, okay, now it's been approved and we can actually start the hard work of let's actually write out a plan on paper to decide how is this going to work.
Something that doesn't really matter, but kind of does. They mentioned the TV deal being one of the big reasons why this was brought up, right? And I think one thing that was really interesting, we actually got an official number from Fox on the MLS final, which had always been kind of hidden. So between Deportes and the like English Fox station, they got just a little bit more than the USL. And one thing that Paul Torino, oh my gosh, Tenorio, thank goodness gracious, always that he brought up that was really interesting was there's more to lose in England, which he kind of mentioned, which I thought was fascinating because it's something I really hadn't thought about. But when you're talking about how much money there is in losing these, like going down a division, you don't really get that as much in the USL in the US because the TV money isn't as big, which is really the big money maker in the Premier League.
This is a thing I know I've brought up in the past when we've had these discussions. It is disastrous if you're a Premier League team with a Premier League wage structure and then you get sent down to the Championship. Yes, there is a jump between the Championship and League One, but it's small potatoes for the people who own pro sports teams. And the same thing applies to the revenue. The same thing applies to advertising. Just because your local hospital wants to put their name on your jersey because you're in the USL Championship, that doesn't really change in League One. And that won't change even if Pro Rel is a thing. There's almost an upside to the fact that this league is a little bit of small potatoes right now. Like it makes it easier to make the bold decision now and then try to raise all the boats with the tide.
And I think crucially setting this as 2028, you have the incoming World Cup happening next summer or for 2026 that will generate a lot of interest in the sport within this country. But if you set it out at 2028, you can communicate to all of these clubs that say, hey, get your houses in order because this is when it's going to come. And also communicate to the fan bases to say there's going to be an expectation that by 2028, if you finish rock bottom of your league, there's a likelihood that you'll be going back down. But like we've mentioned previously, a lot of USL fans has been clamoring for Pro Rel for many years. So I do believe there's going to be that buy-in from the fan base moving forward.
Time for me to be the naysayer here and just bring up the thing that everybody else will say. When hashtag Pro Rel USA at change US soccer forever please goes on Twitter X Blue Sky, and it's like, actually, this is not an open system, so therefore it is not Pro Rel. This is actually just a gimmick. Kinda. That's what people want. People want it to be an open system that anybody can join. And people are going to tell you that when you say, but the USL has Pro Rel, and they'll say, nah, gimmick. You had to buy your way into it anyway. It's fake. Dangling the carrot, as that one says. I think that conversation is real and does have to happen. But hey, you know what? This is an amazing first step that we honestly, including me, never thought was actually going to happen.
I think to be Debbie Downer in a different direction, it's very much a confidence game at the moment of the USL is saying, we're going to be D1. The USL is saying, we're going to add Pro Rel with the expectation that it'll mean more ad money, more TV money, more interest from fans. What does that look like in 2028? Will there actually be an impact? Is CBS going to say, okay, we're going to up the contract 200% because you have made these changes? That isn't a sure thing. As much as we see the reaction online, that really isn't representative of the factors that drive attendance or drive fan interest overall. Like, we are seeing a subset of people who are highly passionate about soccer, highly knowledgeable about these systems that the average family doesn't care about when they're going to try to watch something to get some entertainment on a Saturday night. So Pro-Rel is fun. Pro-Rel could be a real game changer. I don't think it is 100% guaranteed to be so.
And to, I guess, go Debbie Downer, to, I guess, to complete the trifecta in the other direction, is the kind of elephant in the room is MLS on, like, how does MLS react to USL going about these changes? Because USL is very much kind of saying we're coming for MLS's crown, or at least trying to take away some part of the pie that MLS currently controls and for a long time has dominated within US soccer. Of MLS kind of would see USL as a threat to that to an extent. And it's going to be interesting to see how MLS kind of positions themselves, how they react to it, because 4 years is a long time. Because like 4 years ago, we had San Diego Loyal in this league, and now it's San Diego FC up in MLS, sadly. And where the MLS is in 2028, where USL is in 2028 is going to be rather tough to predict. So while it's exciting from this part, there is that kind of thought in the back of my head that MLS is going to do a lot of however much they can to muscle their way through this.
I think one thing that and this is kind of my last thoughts on the whole matter before we kind of move on, because believe it or not, we have more to the show planned besides just Pro-Rel. So stick around if you actually want to hear some good USL chatter.
Whoa. We don't talk about games here, dude.
Fair point. I guess for me, what this is going to come down to is what else is the incentive that we aren't seeing, right? And again, Paul did a great job of outlining the facts as we know them, which is supermajority voted, not unanimous, and that a lot of teams, like we said in our USL Announces Division 1 podcast that we did, which if you didn't listen to that, you should listen to that. But we have talked to people in front offices in the USL, and a lot of the conversation was, why won't we ever vote for Pro-Rel as a championship team if all we can do is get relegated, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, there is no promotion aspect. Now, this is something that Paul McDonald mentioned before, where he was like, we're working on getting players or teams those parachute payments, even if they are minuscule compared to England or somewhere else. I think we also talked about the US Open Cup today. How does promotion money work? Do you get prize money for winning the league? Because right now, as far as I know, even if you win the USL Championship or League One, you don't get anything for winning the league. I think that is something that they will have to change, because if you have these established Division 1 teams and you get promoted and you don't have that little extra financial push from that promotion money that you would get for prize, then you're just going to come straight back down. And I think that's something they have to really think about. If we have any final thoughts, and move on. It looks like
it is just crazy to see, like, here I am binging between 8 different US Open Cup games, and the USL is implementing promotion and relegation. Like, funny how it just kind of drops out of nowhere on a Tuesday night.
They knew we were recording tonight, so it was honestly very, very kind of them.
Yeah, shout out to the leakers at the league office who are looking out for us and us alone.
I think timing it with the Open Cup, which is a celebration of Lower League soccer, especially in these early rounds, definitely sends a very specific message of what the goal of Pro-Rel is.
Can I just blindly thank Nicholas Murray, even though I know he wasn't the leaker?
Thanks, we should always be thanking Nicholas Murray. Go read the interview with really Sanchez. Go read everything he writes. It's all great.
Subscribe to the Rondo.
I love the Rondo. Also the back four, which does not mean 4 topics, by the way, in case you didn't know.
I think I put too many graphics in and it got caught in people's spam filters because my open rate tanked. So it needs to be shorter next week.
That's so tough. Hey, by the way, one last thing before we get into matches. I want to just kind of talk about, hey, Ronaldinho was at the Greenville versus Union Omaha match, which we've already talked about. We talked about it last Tuesday, but he was there and like stayed for the match. It wasn't I showed up to the groundbreaking and they said he would stay, but he looked like he was into it. And that was a really fun thing to see. We kind of mentioned it before. A highlight of his career was meeting Gio Cañas, but like he got treated to a fun match of Greenville, Omaha, where despite what the scoreline says, Omaha looked pretty good in the first half, just got beat by kind of 2 wonder goals. And then a third one comes in later. It was a great showcase for the league, not even just for Ronaldinho being there, but honestly for Ronaldinho to even kind of see the standard of the league because yes, it's the third tier in the US. If you compare it to the Premier League, it's going to look bad, obviously. But I bet for a lot of people, including him, it was probably a higher level than he was expecting.
No, for sure. Like that was a very well played game. I thought Omaha was particularly impressive in the way they pressed early on. Kudos to Greenville because they knew how to adjust. Obviously, they adapted their game plan match over match from what we saw in the draw against Westchester in the opener. That's the sort of thinking on your feet ability that Greenville has in terms of their coaching staff and their tacticians on the sideline. But they've got a very versatile group of players as well who can do multiple things, execute on multiple styles, really let them kind of get more direct, up the tempo against that press. And it's early. Omaha wasn't as organized as we'll see them a couple months from now. But yeah, full credit to Greenville for doing what was needed to get the win there and impress Ronaldinho.
And full credit to Kaylor and John, who both were the only ones of our podcast to predict Greenville to get the win for last week.
Amazing. I mean, anything I can do to get out to that early lead before I inevitably tank it. And we will get into matches, and we will talk about this later. But since we have a lot of people listening to the top of the show, be on the lookout to Oakland, California, as they have sold over 20,000 tickets to watch San Antonio FC versus your Oakland Roots SC, where because of international breaks and the U.S. and Mexico playing midweek and everything else, there is a really good chance that the Oakland Roots will be the most viewed North American team this weekend, which is an insane thing to say, but that's what happens when you are loyal to your roots, right? You are loyal to the soil. That's a different team. Like you are rooted in Oakland and you go community first. You get 20,000 people through your door, not including what you're going to get from walk-ups. It's incredible stuff.
It's the long tail of what they've done in the community since day one, even in their pre-USL days. A testament to the marketing, the branding, the boots on the ground. Like I know when we were out there last summer, nothing but impressed with the organization Oakland's got going. And I think it's a really interesting collision with this moment in the city where you saw the Warriors leave. Obviously, the A's are gone. They're stepping up into a venue that matters to people in the East Bay. It's a major moment for the Roots as an organization, arguably for the league as a whole. So excited to see what it looks like.
But we will talk about that prediction of that match at the end of the show. So stick around until then. Let's go ahead and hop over to the USL Super League, why don't we? Where there is a new team on top. Again, Gio Cañas, our friend, please post the meme because right now we have a Fort Lauderdale on top of the table as they take a 2-0 win over Brooklyn FC, where Brooklyn has been sputtering after the winter break. But Fort Lauderdale, this entire season has just been as consistent can be, where Shania Gordon walks away with a brace to get both goals in a 2-0 win. It was a fantastic showing out of Fort Lauderdale. Really impressive as Brooklyn opens up Coney Island for the first time, which was a cool place to see them play. But I'm sure the Brooklyn faithful wanted to see a better performance out of the lads.
The Latzes, I like it.
It's
They haven't reported an attendance number yet, but every indication from the club was that they were nearing a sellout, maybe more than 7,000 people. So we'll see what the number looks like. And that was on what I can personally attest to was a pretty ugly Saturday in terms of the weather up here in New York. But yeah, I mean, awesome to see what's going on with the fan side of things. But Fort Lauderdale really took it to them. As always with this United side, you've got Hamid and Gordon on the wings. And this was really the coming out party for Jasmine, or rather for Shania Gordon in terms of her goal scoring. She's been somebody that's stretched the sidelines all season long, hasn't really been rewarded in terms of the goal contributions. But you throw in the impact of Addie McCain and Kiera Prioli kind of disrupting things against Brooklyn's number 8s and number 6s, working to the break, getting Gordon chances. It was a strong game plan from Tyrone Mears and company from Fort Lauderdale, and a little bit more evidence that I think Brooklyn needs to add a little something in that midfield.
Yeah, and this was a Fort Lauderdale team to the tail end of the winter schedule. They had gone, I think it was 6 of their final 7 games without a win, and to open up the spring schedule with 8 matches, or their last 8 matches haven't gone unbeaten. They've really turned around their fortunes here in the Super League and established themselves atop the league at the moment. But yeah, Brooklyn, even though they're still joint with Fort Lauderdale atop the league on points, they need to certainly figure something out, and it's a tough match coming up next for them against Dallas.
Something I kind of noticed, and I don't want to take anything away from Fort Lauderdale here because, like I mentioned, they have been consistent all season long, really. But unfortunately, this feels like more of the conversation is kind of the fall off of Brooklyn because it is so sudden. And I guess my question, John, is what's kind of caused it? Because when I watched it, like what we got used to in the fall section of this is this free flowing midfield that just kind of linked together and really created beautiful goals. And there were times that the ladies were just absolutely just bumping into each other. They were going into each other's spaces. It's like they had no idea where they were supposed to be, which doesn't really make any sense to me because it doesn't feel like they lost any pieces that or really gained anything that would cause this major disruption. Are you kind of seeing the same thing?
For sure. And I think it's the rest of the league catching up. Like Brooklyn came out and from day one had that level of chemistry and organization. To the credit of, like, for instance, Fort Lauderdale in this match, they understood that Brooklyn, when they're trying to build out, they want to get Sam Kroger involved in the number 6 spot, kind of let her drop in, and then you're flowing into the midfielders in the half spaces. The workbook is out on how to stop that. Like we saw 2 players kind of sitting in the middle and clogging space for United. Dallas did it with an extra presser a couple of weeks back when they routed Brooklyn. If you can stop that from happening and stop Brooklyn from being able to establish control in the attacking half, suddenly they aren't able to be free flowing. They aren't able to counterpress in the same way. You're kind of losing the rhythms that made Brooklyn so effective early in the season. It'll be interesting to see how they change the system. I think personnel-based shifts haven't really worked in the past couple weeks. I would be looking for something a little bit more systematic. Maybe you go back 3. Maybe you really put a focus on direct build from the back. I don't know what the answer is, but something's got to give.
I mean, Brooklyn has gone the last 5 hours without scoring a goal. And this is a team who, at the end of the winter schedule, they had 4 consecutive shutout victories.
So let's go ahead and move on to our next section here, which is going to be going over to League One. And we have Charlotte. Hey, maybe that Eamon Zaya guy has a bit of an idea of what he's talking about because this Charlotte team looked dang good in their opening match.
Did what Charlotte does on Saturday, defending well in a 4-4-2 and allowing their best players to get expressive when the moment arose. You're seeing them defending in that shape here. They're compressing in the midfield when Richmond tries to break lines, and you'll notice winger Rafael Oregi dropping in low. That gives Luis Alvarez the opportunity to make a curling run to replace Oregi in the right channel as his team breaks toward the final third. Notice the movement of the forwards. Alvarez is hugging wide, but Christian Chaney, who came on shortly after halftime, is distracting a defender with his own run. That opens up a lane for Omar Sis running out of the midfield and Anthony Sorensen making that far post left wing run to get in behind and score. It's a simple play, but it's one that's very impressive for Charlotte in the early going this season.
So one thing that was not included in there was a Terzaghi penalty that was awarded where he does kind of sky it. Unfortunate for him. You do think that if he's a little bit in better form, he does bury it because Emilio Terzaghi, obviously. But John, as you mentioned, Charlotte really good and really fluid in what they were doing both on and off the ball. Super impressive.
I think the thing with Charlotte always is that this is a team that doesn't really care if they're possessing. I think they only had about a third of the ball in this match. They're very good about sitting deep, finding their defensive structure, and almost waiting out whatever their opponent is trying to do. But as soon as they regain, they're letting their best offensive players cook. In the past, that's been Dane Kelly, Joel Johnson. It's been different players over the years. We got a preview of it with John Vaquero partially before he went off injured in this. But Luis Alvarez, I highlighted him in the tactics show. One of the smartest movers in League One, somebody who's unbelievable with the ball at his feet. You throw that in with the new talent on show in Charlotte, this team is going to be A-okay.
And I like to think that Charlotte had heard Alex and he talking about their lack of, I guess, transfer movement or roster changes in the season and leading up to this, and wanted to spite both of us and come out there with a very strong win. But I mean, you look at a Charlotte team who, beyond the Richmond penalty, they nearly doubled what Richmond had in terms of XG from this match. They had 38 possession of the ball, and they still managed to come out on top with this one. Charlotte will ultimately be fine.
One thing that was, and this is the same place I always go, and this is where just my brain goes. And everybody does this. They find their favorite player on a team and they just really zone in on them, and that's just kind of what they do. But this match just felt like an Omar Sis masterclass. Like everything he did was golden. You mentioned him in the tactics show. What he does as a holding midfielder is impressive, especially for how young he is. I mean, he's still, is he 20? Barely? Like he's young.
23.
But like 23. Oh, wow. He's older than I thought he was. But what he does defensively is impressive. But his ability to truly go box to box, I mean, he's one of the best in the league, and he should be talked about that way.
It's kind of easy to miss that impact just given how deep Charlotte tends to play, but very decent with the ball at his feet. You saw the progressivity in that play and the smart run he's making. Somebody who can be a real powerhouse up the middle for this Independence team, given the fact that Rayon Jeji went over to Sacramento, some of the other shifts with the roster construction. I think it's only going to be a bigger onus on Sis to come up big throughout 2025. And I mean, we all believe clearly that he's up to the task.
Any final thoughts on this match before we go out west to the Pacific Northwest?
Darwin Espinal, good.
Very good. He's so good. I really believe in this Richmond team, by the way. I still have a lot of love and hope for this Richmond team. I said in the preseason, which I know we're not that far removed from, they felt like the biggest mover ups for me of the teams that were outside the playoff spot. I think they could be real deal contenders if they could get that front line really like flowing and cooking.
What's interesting with Espinal is like he played striker so often in Nisa. He's doing it on the left wing, looking so dynamic, kind of taking players on. A couple of nice switches in this last game as well. He's the complete package on that front line for Richmond.
And Richmond have a match against new expansion side AV Alta, who didn't look all that impressive against Tormenta this week. And so certainly another opportunity for the Kickers to get 3 points on the board.
Well, as we go up now to the Pacific Northwest, let me go ahead and tell you about our friends at Equip Studios who are also going to the Pacific Northwest, as they, our good friend Austin, is now the new kit provider of West Seattle Junction. which is really, really cool. So if you want your team, you want your SG, you want your whatever, hey, us, whenever you go to buy our kits, if you want it to be the same quality of that of a USL League 2 and W League team, go check out Equip Studios. They are here to make all of your kit dreams come true. If you want all the customization of the big brands for a minuscule cost of the big brands, check them out. They want to be accessible to all types of players, teams, and supporters, no matter what the level of play. Again, if you're not so happy with the kit that your team came out in, there are a lot of teams that came out with some pretty bland stuff. Take matters into your own hands and make your own kit. It should be a good time. And again, very affordable. And if you are someone who's on the smaller side or the bigger side, hey, extra smalls, 6XL. They got it all for you. And hey, if you, like we said, want something that's affordable, it's already $40 to have a custom kit, fully customized, that feels really good. But what if we made it 35? Tell them that your friends at the USL show sent you and you get a family and friends discount of $35. You legitimately can't beat that anywhere. For some of the best material I felt for a soccer jersey, and that's not just because he's our sponsor. I said that long before Austin ever gave us money. So seriously, you should check them out. They are the best. They are going to be our kit sponsors for our Portland Hearts of Pine trip. So check them out. Spokane Velocity got up to a 2-0 lead, and they had me shaking in my boots because I picked not one Knox to win this match. But fret not, one Knox comes storming back to have a 2-2 draw in what was one of the most exciting matches we got on Sunday. And hey, it was a fun matchup. We got to see just what this Spokane team can be. But one Knox showed a little bit of scoring gumption that we didn't really see from them last year.
Yeah, really a game of two halves in the truest sense, where one Knox was pretty content to kind of sit off, absorb pressure coming from Spokane early on. And I was interested in the shape that Ian Fuller rolled with in his first game. This was a back three team for all of 2024. Very defensive minded, but went about it in a different way. Essentially, Fuller went with a 5-man midfield that was very focused on preventing Spokane from driving up the central areas. Not quite man-marking players like Luis Gil and Colin Fernandez, but close to it. And Spokane had to find their workarounds. To Lee Wiedman's credit, they did so. Like, you found Masongo Akale making clever runs into the half spaces, getting a little bit more expansive from the back, did wonders for them. Once they took the lead, I think Spokane got a little bit complacent, frankly. They sat off a little bit too much. Knoxville was able to get into the match a lot more involved. And Mark Doyle was huge off the bench. He and Kempis Tequila came into the game maybe 60th minute, 55th. I thought Doyle, who we saw a little bit with Rhode Island last year, but nothing more than a cameo guy for the most part, really did well to change the dynamic, taking players on, breaking things down in the final third. Obviously a little bit messy in terms of the final play with Angelo Kelly kind of making the difference. But yeah, fun to see the fight from both teams. And I think there are real positives to take away, given that it was the opener on both sides.
Yeah, and if you just look at the final half hour of this match, you had 5 shots from Knoxville to Spokane's 2. It really showed a lot of heart from Knoxville, who, after going down 2-0, after having that own goal for the second goal, to come back and rescue a point from this one to head back to Tennessee. He's still unbeaten to start the year, and to rescue that point in the 90th minute just really has to be a positive momentum start for the season. Credit to Phil, who is the one person of our predictions pool who got this pick correct. And I was certainly nervous in that second half because I had picked this match to be, even though a win in our predictions, I did a wager on this being a win or a draw and for Spokane. And it's certainly, Knoxville made it nervous in this second half.
You mentioned the own goal that kind of happened, and obviously if you're one Knox, you're sitting there saying if an own goal off a corner doesn't happen, then we walk away with this match with a 2-1 win. But you kind of mentioned some gumption to come back from the own goal. Talk about goaling. Mikael Goling, who, according to Nicholas Murray, is the fourth player to be officially credited with a goal and an own goal in the USL League One, the first time since 2023. Something that, I mean, honestly, if it was me, if I was a granted, this is why I'm not a professional athlete, I'm just mentally soft. But, if I just sat there and was like, hey, you know what? I just scored an own goal. I'm really sad about it. I let my team down. There's no way I could get my head up and go score a goal on the other end and get my team back into it. Just talk about some serious just way to get back through and just be mentally strong, because I know that's something I would not have been able to do.
The thing about the own goal is I refuse to recognize it. That is a Derek Waldeck Olympico, and I'm going to the grave on that.
It was such a good corner. It came this close to being the corner kick video this week because it was such a good corner. It's an unfortunate own goal because I really don't think there was anything he could do about it.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on this one? No. All right. Well, how about we go over to the championship? Why don't we? As we go check out yet another 4-4 effing 2.
Now 2-0, and they've looked extremely classy in possession in both of their games because of their ability to bend defenses with their 4-4-2. Here, they've got the presence of the double pivot and the presence of a low-seated Kwame Awuah at left back that forces North Carolina to step up in the midfield and thereby leave space between the lines. When that line-breaking pass into Abdelatif Albacora comes, he's able to one-touch it towards Florian Valleau, while Ben Mines on the opposite side makes a run in behind. Suddenly, 2/3 of North Carolina's 3 center backs are committed. Loudoun is able to break through the high line, and it's ultimately an easy goal in the end. It's part of a process and why this team is so effective.
So how about me putting my foot in my mouth, as I always do? I said that this 4-4-2 would not work for Loudoun. I did not think they had the attacking pieces to go score. I thought that their team was so defensively good in the 3-man back line that why would you ever move away from it, especially when you don't have the offensive pieces? Well, that freaking politician, Ryan Martin, made me shut up because they look so good.
I don't think there's a team I've watched this season in the USL that's been as impressive as Loudoun, and doing it against pretty solid sides. Like, say what you will about Birmingham's performance in week 1, say what you will about the state of the health of North Carolina FC. Loudoun is so intentional. They understand exactly where they need to be in relation with one another. The press is aggressive. All of the reads in possession are brilliant. The 4-4-2 is working for them, clearly. Like, Ryan Martin had the concept. He has implemented it with aplomb. They just look stunning. I'm so excited to see them coming up against Lou City.
Yeah, and this Louisville match this weekend is going to be their first opportunity since 2019 to possibly win 3 matches in a row, which is a tremendous achievement for Loudoun. It's the first time since 2022 that they've opened the season with 2 consecutive wins as well. I mean, this is a team in our preseason predictions video that we had pretty much kind of written off and just said we hadn't seen enough from this team entering this year for us to have them anywhere other than outside of the playoffs. And here they are atop the Eastern Conference right now alongside Detroit City. This has been a very good start to the season for Loudoun United.
And I want to mention this question in chat before I have another kind of comment. Why would you ever sign a USL vet to a 25-day contract? To which I would say, look at Lamar Batista, who he got a 25-day contract from San Antonio a couple years ago because there were injuries. They were ready for guys to come back, right? There were just places for players to fill in, and you weren't ready to give a full contract to. The player knew it was essentially a trial that they were allowed to play in actual matches for. That's kind of what they're for, is to be essentially trials, low risk, high reward for both players, both the player and the club. It worked out for Batista, and it's working out for Loudoun. Wasn't it Ben Mines that is on their 25-day contract? So It's a low risk, high reward, especially for a player who did not have a home coming into the season. Why would you turn it down? And if you're a club, why would you not utilize it?
Yeah, and I mean, we saw it with Baquero in Memphis midway through last year. Yeah, Christian Sordo is the one who's on the 25-day now.
Oh,
But
sort of. Sorry.
he's somebody who's been there before. Like, Loudoun has done a great job of recruiting players that have the systematic familiarity already. And kind of the dirty secret of these 25-day contracts is everyone gets extended at the end already. I don't know CBA wise if there's a benefit or if Sordo is just looking for something else and thought, hey, I'll be there. But it's probably 90% odds he just gets extended for the rest of 2025, given the historical precedent.
Also, PK score Sordo in the U.S. Open Cup to send Loudoun through to the next round. So congratulations to Loudoun United. I have a question for you, John, and this was the question I actually had. Both of your tactics shows had to deal with the 4-4-2, right? This is a league that has been moving to the 3-4-3, 3-5-2, and that's kind of what you saw. The most expressive teams play with a three-man back line, and a lot of them still do. But some of the most free-flowing teams we saw were Charlotte and Loudoun in that, that British, English, England are going to play the 4-4 effing 2. We're going to, flat back 4 and defend our way through it. It's looked amazing attacking and solid defensively for these teams.
When you think about trends in the game globally and like the idea of the tactical meta of what the best teams are orienting towards in terms of their strategy, the 4-4-2 has really come back in vogue, especially as a defensive formation. And because it's simple, right? Like you're in the two banks of 4, you've got the 2 forwards, but it's easy to stay compact. It's easy to shift from side to side. You aren't overcomplicating things, and it lets you limit space between the lines. It lets you push up if you want to. And I think Loudoun is a great example of the 4-4-2 doesn't have to be a conservative formation. They're using it to be the best pressing team in the league right now. I think crucially, when you look at some of the clubs that are employing it, whether it's Lexington without the ball or Sacramento without the ball, yes, they're defending with a back 4, but one of those defenders is allowed to push up like a winger in possession. So it creates this kind of best of both worlds situation where you're reaping the benefits because that shape is so solid in block. But when push comes to shove and you're trying to get goals, you're still enjoying what was so good about the back 3 when that was the real prevailing shape across the league. But yeah, it's been a real trend so far that I've been fascinated to see. And it was accidental that both of my tactics shows kind of focused on it. But yeah, you raise a good point.
Ryan, by the way, Carson puts it in the chat, but it's one of my favorite things. So you just kind of accidentally said one show, Loudoun the People's Champs. It is something that has just been really just stuck with us. And at this point, I'm thinking about putting it on a shirt. Like
The Invincible season's still on.
Hey, they're my champs. They are my.
If Loudoun do an Invincible season, man,
Loudoun's the
I'm
first
just
team
retiring.
promoted.
Yeah,
Loudoun's the first team promoted on an Invincible season. You heard it here first.
straight to MLS.
Suck it, DC. All right, let's go ahead and go over to what was the most exciting match, unless you're Phil, who will get his thoughts in a message later. But let's go ahead, go out west to Phoenix versus El Paso. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Kaylor's Corner Market, where we're going to be breaking down Phoenix Rising's expert use of breaking down a mixed marking system, where Phoenix only has 6 players in the box versus El Paso's 10. I want you to first notice just how tight of a little formation we start off with. And because there's only 6 players in the box for Phoenix, that means there's 4 players that have to go somewhere for El Paso, and they are going to be zonal marking. We have 2 in the back, and then we have 2 in the front, 1 on the front post, 1 on the back post. And as this ball comes in, we just expand massively, where we have 3 players who are exiting the 6-yard box and 1 of them going in. So we are really expanding this formation compared to what we saw before, which was a tight little ball. After that, this ball comes in, and here's the mistake by El Paso. You have a player leaving his front post marking, and he goes up to try to win this ball. He misses, and where does Akello put this thing? Of course, he puts it at the front post where the zonal was. And I want you to check out this whole thing uninterrupted. So, it was that set piece had a lot that I could really like. There was so much that I did not talk about because it was so fascinating to me. The one thing that I did not really kind of touch on too much that I really, if I had more than a minute, I wish I could have. Um, El Paso actually did a really good job of defending it. Like, I understand they get scored on. That sounds like that shouldn't be the case. But when I say the one mistake, it legitimately was a player missing the ball, like coming off the post and missing the ball. They did a great job of staying with their man. And yes, you don't want Akello to win the ball. Also, he's a 6'5" midfielder. Good luck, right? It's one mistake that cost them, but it was really good. It was really good set piece defending by El Paso. Just one mistake, but it's really clever by Phoenix to just kind of go into this willingly choosing to be undermanned. It was 6 players versus 10, 11 if you include Jamali Waite. And it didn't matter because they were able to exploit both the zone marks and the man marks. It was just absolutely fascinating.
No, great breakdown. And I think the point you make about clever design, cleverness from Pa Mudoka and that staff really has kind of defined Phoenix as they've tried to adjust on the fly throughout both of their matches this season. By the end of that game against El Paso, when they were on the comeback trail, they were, I mean, kind of speaking to a point where you're just on, they were attacking sort of in a back three, sort of in a back four, letting Emi Cuejo do what he wanted as left back, kind of pushing up into the half space, really adding another threat from an important position. And it was a major reason why they were able to come back from 3 goals down even and end up with a draw. Say what you will about the Mo Traore thing. We'll have some comments from Phil on that momentarily. But Phoenix Rising did really well to keep the grid up, keep up that intensity, and take advantage of an El Paso team that kind of just lost the plot with their structure.
It made me think of an El Paso match. Then it's coincidental that it was the most recent one. But when El Paso drew 4-4 with Colorado Springs back in 2022, that was 946 days ago. So it was very interesting that El Paso was the recent team to also have this very same scoreline. But I mean, credit to where Phoenix had. I mean, and we'll talk about the Traore goal here in a moment, which should be Puskas nominations anyways. But yeah, for Phoenix to come back from 4-1 down to rescue the point from this one really showed a lot of heart. And if you're looking at El Paso from this, I'm still encouraged by the fact that they've been able to generate 4 goals from this match. This was an El Paso team that struggled offensively and have slowly started to figure it out this year under Wilmer Cabrera. But yeah, this has to sting if you're Locomotive to basically toss away a 4-1 lead to have to just settle for a draw.
Yeah, and listen, if you're Armando Moreno, you score a bicycle kick and your goal is not talked about at all. That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. It's one of those that I really feel for El Paso here. And I think some that Phil would kind of mention, and you'll probably hear him and all of the Seriously Loco crowd talk about it. El Paso at home has honestly been a field of horrors for El Paso. They just cannot seem to get over the hump at home. And this finally felt like the match was going to happen. But, John, you mentioned it. Phoenix did not just roll over and die. Last year, I think they might have. I think if this was if this was this team last year, they would have just rolled over and died. It didn't happen this year. El Paso, yes, they give up 3 goals and really just blow that lead. But I think more than El Paso crumbling, I think credit really should be going to Phoenix. Armando Moreno played very well. Obviously a bicycle kick. I never know what to actually do with that. like, okay, like he kind of generated that moment. He kind of didn't. It was just a moment of brilliance. It kind of is what it is. But he's been one of the big bright spots onto what's been a fairly bright start for El Paso. I know they want more results, but it's been a happy beginning to the season. And we mentioned Phil's thoughts, so I am just going to read it from him. I'm not going to change anything. Traore's goal was a mishit clearance, and yes, I'm bitter about it.
I will say he's right. Like Traore just straight up admitted as much in his interview with our friends at PHNX afterwards, but no one cares. Everyone's going to see that clip and be like, yeah, he's the man.
So, there's that. Just in general, John, do you walk away from this more disappointed in El Paso or more impressed with Phoenix?
Definitely more impressed with Phoenix for all the reasons we've been talking about. The intentionality of the changes they made, the fact that they, in contrast to 2024, actually had some fight in them. That's a major differentiator already. If you're Phoenix, you're frustrated. It's 1 point out of 2 matches so far, but the process matters. The fact that they are trusting their system and sticking with the principles is going to end up paying off when it comes to September and October.
And a match against Rhode Island, the reigning Eastern Conference champions this week at home, provides a really good opportunity to put what we've seen these first 2 weeks into practice right now.
So, do we have any final thoughts on this match before we kind of just go to open floor USL time?
Phil talked a little bit last week about how one-sided the El Paso attack was, how it was just Moreno. The way that Wilmer Cabrera kind of moved that team around, getting Tumi Moshaban into the middle as a facilitator that can help work play from side to side, and then inserting a fit Memo Diaz onto the right wing back spot, really gave you kind of this 3-headed threat where you could beat Phoenix from any side. That's a major reason why they got 4 goals. And that feels replicable going forward for the Locomotive. So exciting to see.
I'm having to do like producer things. So if anybody has any USL thoughts across the board, go ahead, let them rip.
Dennis
Ryan,
Sanchez
go for
gets
it.
revenge over Las Vegas as New Mexico heads into Cashman Field and takes a victory over Sanchez's former team, and New Mexico avenges a defeat they had in the playoffs from last season.
Las Vegas is a terrible team to watch. Like, I just need to say, they're playing anti-soccer right now, just sitting deep. There are so many players that are fun on that roster, whether it's Johnny Rodriguez, Valentin Noel, Joe Zhao got on the score sheet, which is nice to see after a kind of passive 2024 from him. But man, just negative football. I can't believe that Antonio Nocerino went in there and pretty much just copy pasted the tactics that did not work at all in Miami. And you're seeing the difference that the talent makes, but geez, tough watch at points for Las Vegas.
Well, let's kind of talk about that because that was one of the matches I did want to discuss in just a little bit because the match was what it was. I guess this is a broader topic, but we saw it. The defending in the championship has been bad at times to start the season. So many players just like slipping and right before a goal, passing the ball to the other team in your own 18-yard box, like we saw with Las Vegas. Just general defensive mistakes. Week 1, both goals for Pittsburgh and North Carolina were just horrible defensive mistakes. Pittsburgh had another weird one, which is probably okay. There's like a lot of just bad defending going on that maybe I was just blind to last year, but this feels different. I don't know. Maybe it's just the beginning of the season.
Yeah, to me, it just kind of feels like the opening week jitters. And some of the slips, like that feels as if it's random bad luck more than anything particularly worrisome. Does it make for some fun moments or dumb moments rather? Yes, but like I expect it to get better soon enough.
For what it's worth, there are 12 games this year that's been over 2.5 goals. So if you're looking at something to wager on, it's worth a chance if the defending is what we've seen it to be over the previous 2 weeks to start the USL Championship season.
So, a couple of things. Did y'all think that was a red card in El Paso at the very end?
No.
Fair. Good point. All right, there we go. Let's see. Lexington, Orange County had a controversial moment. Was that ball in the keeper's hands, and was that fair game? I don't think he had possession of that ball. I think that's a fair tap in, personally.
I do too. I can see why, if you're the goalkeeper in that situation, you might feel aggrieved, because there is this level of protection that is applied to you in that position. But I don't know. It didn't seem controlled enough for my taste.
Let me see. I'm just trying to quickly go over some results just to see what catches my eye, because I had a lot. There was the Detroit City. Man, I like this Detroit City team. The opening shot, by the way, of when they were walking in and all the snow's coming down, you can see the snowflakes as they're walking in. So cool. We need more snow games. Snow games are magical. So I think that was a cool moment. But Colorado gets their early lead. Once Tejada. I mean, it's wonderful stuff out of Colorado Springs. You kind of have a moment of it felt like I won't say dominating, but it definitely felt like the right results. And then a somewhat quick return for Darren Smith, and then it's listed as the Christian Herrera own goal at the very end, which I completely disagree with. I don't know how it's listed as that. Maybe that's Opta, maybe that's FOTMOB, but should not be. Good fight out of Detroit City to get a 2-1 win on the celebration day for Colorado Springs.
It's the second year in a row they've spoiled Colorado Springs home opener.
It was tactically fascinating to see Detroit evolve over the course of that game. Detroit didn't have a test in week 1. Like, they could just carve through Miami short pass after short pass and have their way. And they tried to do the same thing for the first 45 minutes. And then you kind of saw this transition towards classic Detroit, getting a little bit more direct, leaning into the physicality somewhat more. I thought Alex Villanueva was unreal at the left wing back spot as an outlet for those diagonal passes. That allowed them to break the Colorado Springs press. Again, we saw the switchbacks not really able to defend a lead, which I think is pretty worrisome at the moment, given some of the big names in that defense. But yeah, credit to Detroit for thinking on their feet, doing what they needed to do tactically. They're going to be tough, man. They've got a ton of forwards that are interesting. The midfield is good. You can always bank on that defense. This feels like a team that, despite my doubts in the preseason, is really legit.
And we were the three of the podcast last week who picked Detroit to win.
Look at
Did
us.
I really? Wow. Look at me.
I want to go jump down to League One for a second. Tormenta gets a 2-0 win over AV Alta, and I believe AV Alta's first ever match. Yes. And a guy that I kind of mentioned preseason, Yannick Bazzini, kind of shows what we kind of saw with him with Vermont Green and with the University of Vermont. Gets a quick 8-minute brace, and then they just kind of sit on it, where Tormenta and AV Alta had a little bit going forward for them, but honestly, Tormenta just did a great job at defending, something they did not do a single time last year. So it's a really bright spot defensively for them. And you now see you have a lot of goal scorers for Tormenta if they can keep these guys going.
I think the wing play we saw in week 1 that was a little bit imbalanced for Tormenta came good immediately against Alta. And once they got that lead, they were never going to give it up. Definitely things to work on from the Alta side of things. I appreciated the aggression that Brian Kleiben brought tactically, but clearly they didn't have what they needed in the defensive midfield. They were losing a lot of one-on-ones in the wide areas. This team will be okay, and they'll be better when they get Miguel Ibarra and Alexis Cerritos integrated in the starting lineup. But yeah, not what you want to see for the first game ever.
And I'm just going to go ahead and go down to Andy, where we're going to go down to Monterey Bay, and we're not going to talk about the 3-2 win that they had over the Oakland Roots. We're going to talk about, as he calls them, Cthulhu Jr. Don't disrespect Kelpie like that. What did you think of Kelpie?
I think he looks insane, and I love him. Like, whoever designed that thing that looks like some sort of like kitchen cleaning implement with a face, and he's like wearing a Panama hat, I'm in. Like, that's what I want out of every mascot, but he's objectively wild.
Yeah, the design for that is just phenomenal. Like, I would love to like just speak to the artist who made that, or be a fly on the room of how can we just design the mascot, and just I wanted to hear the entire process behind it. And then the Finding Nemo fish on the back of the mascot was such a great touch as well.
Okay, this is a random deep. Maybe this is not what I thought it was. Do y'all remember like the Tim Burton? I don't know if it ever made to a movie, but it's Oyster Boy. Don't know what I'm talking
I
about.
don't at all, but I love the idea of this.
Okay, there is one particular picture where he is just a giant oyster shell. That's all he is. That's his head. It's just a giant oyster shell. And that's what Kelpie reminded me of instantly.
I love this. Yeah.
It-
Kudos to the people at Monterey Bay, man, because they knocked it out of the park with this guy.
We're talking about it, and that's all that matters.
I want to meet
Hold
him.
on. I got it. By the way, for people who are in our live stream, I'm posting this in the chat so you all know what I'm talking about.
Kaylee
So,
with the deepest of cuts on this. I love it.
It's what Kelpie reminds me of. Is Oyster Boy by Tim Burton.
I mean, while he's finding it, this is Monterey Bay's almost a year, like April 13th of last year was the last time they scored 3 goals in a match. And to do this as their first home match victory since June of last year, which ironically was also against Oakland, it's just phenomenal that the fans there who went through a tough season last year could be able to walk away from a home match with a win.
And this is one of those matches for me where I think that if you're another USL championship team, you're looking at Milanago and saying, why are we not going after more League One players? Because while Milanago was a good League One player, he was not one of these superstars of the league, and he immediately contributed. And you know what? There's a chance that he doesn't start on a lot of championship teams, but I would want him coming off of our bench in Birmingham. He's that kind of player. He was doing great things passing the ball. He obviously scored when it mattered. He's someone that you really would want to see.
He's got more end product than Preston, dare I say it. Like, I think there are a lot of teams where he would be a real valuable contributor.
Yeah. I think that this is you need to start looking at League One a lot more seriously, and not just for the superstars, because the gap is not as big as you think it is.
And just to circle back,
It's just not.
if Monterey makes the playoffs, I think I'm going to go out there and steal the Kelpie costume. I'm committing to that on the podcast. So when it happens,
What we
we'll
need
never do it.
is, I mean, if we're going to go with the full memes ending to the year, we need Monterey Bay and Kelpie to win the Western Conference, running into Loudoun's invincible season in the Eastern Conference.
I mean, just Loudoun versus Monterey in the final is already just blowing my mind as a pure hypothetical. I don't know what I would do in the actuality.
You can already imagine the CBS executive putting a gun in his mouth with that.
For what it's worth, as it stands, Monterey Bay and Loudoun do not play each other in the regular season. They could meet in the Jägermeister Cup, given how that shakes out. But the invincible season, that dream of them playing Monterey Bay, it's still alive.
Y'all ready to go to some predictions?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead, and I need to circle up to it, where we are going to start off with the East Bay. We are going to go to Oakland, where we mentioned it already. They're going to have over 20,000 in attendance. And there's a good chance that number is going to get higher and higher and higher and higher as we still have 4 more days to go. As they're taking on a San Antonio team whom we have not talked about yet, but have been impressive to start this season. Meanwhile, Oakland, frankly, have not. They got a few more goals than I thought they would early on this season, but it's yet to result in wins. Can Oakland put on a show and get a win in Oakland Coliseum in front of 20,000 plus? John.
Well, my lock pick for the week is San Antonio winning this game. I hate to say it for Roots fans, and it's less of a reflection on them. I was waxing poetic about this organization, but I'm really bought in on San Antonio. I think the press is unbelievable. What you're getting with LaCava and Pacheco on the wings is ridiculous. Cronulla and Tainer might be the best center back pair in the league. Too much momentum from the San Antonio side here.
And John, you had mentioned it in your Back Four article this week. They have only allowed 0.7 XG for San Antonio across 2 games. I mean, they stifled Bob Lilly's Pittsburgh Riverhounds this past week in their 2-0 victory. Like, this is, by XG standards, the current best team in USL championships defensively. I really think San Antonio is going to win this one as well. They've actually never lost to Oakland historically. And if we're looking at the just fun anecdote, the previous tenants of this stadium, the Raiders lost their first game in the Coliseum. The baseball team who shall not be named lost their first game in the Coliseum. So the Roots have the chance, if they win this weekend, to be the first team to ever win their debut match in this stadium. But I'm backing San Antonio.
I mean, that's an incredible grab stat-wise. So shout out to that one, Ryan. Hey, as that one movie said, how can you not be romantic about baseball? Right.
Put some respect on Field of Dreams here, buddy.
Which is
actually Moneyball. Wait.
It is Moneyball. It is Moneyball. Yeah. So all right, Mr. Movie Guy.
Yeah, here I am. I know.
But yeah, so it's hard for me to pick against Oakland. And I'm not going to tell you anything about stats. I'm not going to tell you anything about tactics, because if I did, I would convince myself of San Antonio winning. But there's just something about a community coming together behind the Roots, 20,000 plus, all there for Oakland. It feels too big to fail. I love what they're doing. I think that this is going to be a huge moment, and not just club history, but kind of USL history as well. And I think that this is going to be a win for the Oakland Roots. Also, I don't allow myself to pick draws, which might be the bigger part of this. So, next one, the first ever match. Well, second ever match. Ryan, this is a quick stat grab for you to find. It may not be possible. I don't know how many teams have played their first played their first ever match in the US Open Cup. But Texoma plays their first ever league match coming up against Knoxville, whom Knoxville we saw coming back from a 2-0 deficit against Spokane. Texoma, as we talked about in the pre-match preview, did not even have like 11 players on the roster for a long time. They do now, but there is a big uphill to climb there. Right, John?
Looking a bit shaky tonight against Foro. You're seeing them in a back three, trying to get Pepe and Spengler involved up front. I don't know if you can read too much into that, given that the Open Cup is weird and bizarre. But Knoxville looked so composed defensively. They've got the weapons offensively if they want to bring them off the bench or give them the start this time out. Soft lean towards Knoxville getting the win here.
I've actually backed Knoxville for this one. Kaylor, you had mentioned that it was for the longest time Texoma didn't have 11 players on the roster leading into the year. I mean, they currently don't have 11 players on the field right now for their Open Cup match. I was very encouraged by what Knoxville did last week against Spokane to come back from 2-0 down. I think they get the win here, and it continues the trend that was started by Alta of these expansion teams aren't winning their opening games in USL League One. So I've locked Knoxville.
I have also decided to take the lock with Knoxville. Texoma, listen, I hope you shock me. I hope you come out there and just really do some great things. But the team, I don't think has had long enough to gel. And when you go against a team that we kind of saw this week of great teams who had not played together yet, playing against teams who have just that 1 week of match experience, they came out hot. And I'm going to continue that trend where one Knox has that one match underneath them. Texoma does not. It's a win for Texoma. Knoxville, my bad. And then lastly, we're going to go back to Brooklyn, but it has not been a good run for them. We talked about them already. And this is a Dallas team that just demolished them 6-0, if I remember right. This was a mammoth blowout. So do you think there's any chance that Brooklyn can, reverse their fortunes a bit?
No, not really. I see what Brooklyn did in that match. I see their performance against Fort Lauderdale over the weekend. The dynamic hasn't changed, and I don't necessarily think that Jess Silva is going to rip up the tactical blueprint. Maybe Brooklyn surprises me, but yeah, going Dallas here.
Yeah, I've picked Dallas to win this one as well. What I'm really looking for out of Brooklyn for this one is to score their first goal in 5 hours of match play. But I just think Dallas, just coming off the momentum of that 6-0 victory that they had a few weeks ago, is going to kind of carry through to this match and get the victory. Oh, and Taylor, you were asking me to check the stats. The Northern Colorado Hailstorm played a U.S. Open Cup match 3 days before their first USL League One match.
How did those results turn out for them? Just curious.
The Hailstorm upset the Colorado Springs Switchbacks back in 2022, and then they had a 1-1 draw with Richmond. Both games were on the road.
Good luck to Texoma. Maybe there is an upside for you. Yeah, for Brooklyn and Dallas, this is an unfortunate situation where I get into this idea of just blindly trust it until I don't, or I don't trust it until I do. And Brooklyn was in my trust it until I don't. And I don't trust it. Until I see an upturn, and maybe they return the favor, maybe they win this match 5-0, 6-0, and everything's evened out in the end. We say, oh, there's the Brooklyn we know and love. But until I see it on the field, I just don't believe it's going to happen. I'm taking Dallas.
Yeah.
How about, do we have any final USL thoughts for the night?
I'm just going to plug Backheeled because I'll probably have a Pro Roll article up tomorrow. So go subscribe or whatever.
It's worth the money. You should do it. Also, I know people don't like paying for things, but if you like good quality journalism, you should sub. Also, I mean, not just that, but we found out that Pro Roll is happening via The Athletic, a paid subscription.
If you're one of the people who posts the full text of an Athletic article in a Reddit thread, I hope you go to jail. That's all I got.
Fair. It's like $1, right? It's $1.
When they're constantly running specials, so it costs nothing if you're clever.
Yeah, and then Backheeled is $8, and it's worth it. I don't listen. I'm gonna be honest, and I know you plug everybody else's stuff, John. I'm just gonna be completely honest. I have nothing with Backheeled. I wasn't invited to do anything. It's fine. I'm not cool. But I don't read anything that's not USL, right? Right. I don't read the U.S. national team. I don't read the MLS stuff. I just don't. It's not something that really interests me. But it's the best USL written content out there, and you should pay for that. It is so good.
Appreciate it.
It helps buy John the coffee that will keep him up tonight to write that article.
Yeah, right.
or the Red Bull.
Yes. Ryan, do you have any final USL thoughts?
Just everyone for Oakland, enjoy the day out there. It's been really fun to just see the entire club grow, and it just reminds me that I still own this Oakland Roots blanket.
Yeah.
Love it. I guess final USL thought for me, I started obviously doing the corner kick and free kick thing. Just this week we had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 free kicks and corners. By the way, direct free kicks that go straight into the net from the shot does not count. I'm talking about actual set piece plays. We had 14 of those just last week. And you can tell which teams have invested in set piece coaches and actually take time to invest in their set pieces, because it's like you can tell just by watching them. And this is just another moment for us just to talk about how good Charleston is. Cal Jennings gets his brace for them because of 2 set pieces. When I went and watched Charleston training, Ben Pierman and Ben Clemens both told me you can film anything except for set pieces. Like, that is Ben Pierman's baby, and you can tell because it got them 2 goals versus Rhode Island. That is just good stuff. You can tell which teams care about it. It's making a big difference.
Lou City was first in the league by a country mile on corner kick production last season, and it's the underrated reason why they marched to the Players' Shield. It's massive, and the best teams all recognize that value. So I think that's why your project is so cool this year, Kaylor.
Also, it got mentioned, Foro does take the lead. This could be the first USL team knocked out if Texoma does not figure it out.
Oh, and one
Prophecy
other
is not true.
USO one. I laughed at the choice of gift from Raising Anchor on Blue Sky to do the Rocket Raccoon with the blaster, or for their kind of recap of the match. I thought that was clever. Results aside for Rhode Island.
Hey, welcome back, Pedro 2025. I can't believe we got this long.
Oh, so good. I'm glad that's just a thing. I'm glad it's just a thing.
Makes me so happy.
Listen, someone please let Ben sell raccoon merch. Just only raccoon merch. If you can just give me a raccoon hat.
That's all I need.
All right, final thoughts for the night. Ryan.
Yeah, we've reached the 2nd episode of it, but Righteous Gemstones final season has launched on HBO, so it's been really enjoyable. Kind of an off the wall start to the season with its premiere, but the usual gang is all back for the 2nd episode, and it's as funny as ever. So go watch it.
It's the best.
John.
Yeah, so Major League Baseball is back. Cubs and Dodgers are over in Japan. Obviously, baseball is great. I'm happy about that. But Chicagoans are there in Japan. And I have watched probably 5 to 10 videos today of people from Chicago who brought little shot bottles of Malort and are just giving
love it.
Japanese people Malort. This is the funniest thing I've ever seen, man. I cannot stop watching these.
I went to Chicago to watch Reds Cubs with the best man at my wedding this summer. And as soon as we get to Wrigleyville, he looks at me. I'm like, are we going to go to Wrigley? He's like, no, we're going to a bar. Why? He's like, you got to try Malort. I'm like, what's Malort? He goes, come on, I'm paying for it. Very first thing. It's just a rite of passage. It's awesome. I love those videos. There's one guy, one of those videos that you're talking about. He takes like a swig of it, doesn't even get through like a fourth of the shooter, and he just goes, go Cubs, go.
It's amazing, man.
It's so good.
Melting pot.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I have it? Yeah. So kind of, this is, I guess, sort of serious. I don't like ending on serious things, but like weather got really bad down here, and there was a tornado that missed the school that I teach at by about a mile or two. And like a couple of the kids that like go to my schools, like their house got hit. Luckily, no one got hurt in those. But it was I mean, we've lived through these tornadoes for a long time. Like I've lived through it all, like see my own house get hit by a tornado. But it was so just like crazy seeing like a place that you work and just being like, oh my gosh, what is like those are going towards people's houses. And like when they zoom in and you can see neighborhoods and you're like, oh gosh, I know people that live there. Um, it was it was helpless and I did not like it, but it's one of those things that I shout out to the meteorologist, by the way. And those anytime you can, I know everybody loves to not like the weatherman because it always rains when they says it's going to be sunny or whatever. But they warned a long time ahead of those storms, and people unfortunately passed, but it was nowhere close to what it could have been if it wasn't for them. So like big shout out to the weather people. So
yeah, I'm glad you're happy, healthy, all that jazz.
Yeah. Good. The damage was crazy, by the way. I posted on it about Blue Sky. There was a video that was I took a month ago from the same exact spot of it snowing, and then there's just like no trees. Like all the trees are gone. There's no leaves, and it's like what just happened? It was insane. So yeah. Yeah. I really don't know how to end after that. I guess shout out to Equipped. Go check them out. Go buy kits. I don't know. Check out our Patreon. Check out Equipped Studios. Good stuff. And watch all of the U.S. Open Cup because there's some fun stuff happening right now. Penalties. Greenville, congratulations on getting through, and a lot more matches to come tomorrow. So check out the U.S. Open Cup as always. And Pro Rel's happening. Take your shots, everybody. And for the first and final time of night.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see everyone again next time.